Can you shed some light on what we've been discussing about the question of revenue versus expenditure?
You can always tell this story any way you want.
No,
the fact is, though, that during the Howard era, we had an enormous increase in revenue that was unexpected, and each year Treasury got the numbers wrong because they underestimated the amount of revenue coming in. Nobody foresaw the mining boom, the resources boom, and the extent to which it would provide an income to Australia. And through that period, the Howard government, rightly or wrongly, we all agreed with it at the time, but it cut back on income tax. I think there was something like 7 income tax cuts through that period, and it didn't make up for that mix in revenue that was foregone. We were getting the revenue coming in from the resources boom, from the extra tax from companies. We actually loaded up the tax base onto corporate taxes, and we reduced income taxes. And Kevin Rudd did exactly the same thing when he was first elected. So we had a skewed tax system, if you like. And as soon as the financial crisis hit, we had a massive drop-off in company tax. We had a massive drop-off in capital gains tax because housing prices went backwards, the share market went backwards, so we didn't get capital gains tax. And that was a crisis of revenue, and we didn't have coming in anymore.
So what do you think needs to be done to address this? And do you think the government has the political will, the political courage to do it?
No. I don't think any government has the political will or courage to do proper tax reform. And look, we had a massive inquiry into the tax system. It was called the Henry Tax Review. It was a very, very good tax review, and at its centrepiece was a resources rent tax. Now, resources are one-off. You dig them out of the ground, you send them off to China. That's the one chance you get to make any money out of it. They're non-renewable. So once they're gone, it's gone. And these are resources that really belong not just to us, but to our children, our grandchildren. And I've always argued that we should have a proper resources rent tax. That money should go into a sovereign wealth fund so that it can earn money for generations into the future. That was just abandoned. Well, it wasn't abandoned. It was introduced in the worst, most haphazard manner. Nobody understood the model that Ken Henry came up with. It was very easy to attack. And then you had the resources companies themselves rewrite the legislation so that they didn't have to pay any money.
Yeah, poorly constructed. But now we're not going to have that debate anymore because, again, it's politically impossible. What are the debates we need to be having? Superannuation, tax structure, those kinds of...
Yep. Look, I still think resources is an area that we really do need to debate. The two crowning glories that this government says that the two successes that it's had in terms of fiscal policy is to get rid of 2 sources of income, the carbon tax and the mining tax. Now, we do have a mining tax. A lot of people don't realise this. One that's operated for 25, 30 years, highly successful. It's on oil and gas. Now, somehow or other, it's okay to have a mining tax on oil and gas, but it's a handbrake on the economy if you have it on coal and iron ore. I don't quite get the distinction there.
What about negative gearing? Do you think it's...
Well, look, all those things, Australia is one of the countries that has the highest level of what's known as tax expenditures. These are tax breaks given to companies, individuals. They tend to favour the wealthy over the poor. Negative gearing is one of them. There are tax breaks on superannuation that favour... But all of these things are just too difficult to tackle in the current political environment.
This is the philosophical problem I have with it all, is that they do get referred to by Treasury as tax expenditures. That starts off with the assumption that all money belongs to the government except that which we let you keep. Where I take it from the opposite point of view, that the government doesn't have any money except that which it legislates to take from people.
Do you see that as a philosophical problem?
Which is why I target spending. Let's not talk about revenue all the time. Why don't we have this debate? You're talking about 5 different revenue measures. Let's talk about 5 different spending measures that we can reduce by the equivalent amounts that we would raise from the mining tax or the carbon tax. Let's talk about cutting spending.
But what you're talking about is cutting the welfare, or not, well, I shouldn't say welfare, cutting the living standards of Australians, because we've either got to pay more tax or reduce or have less services. You can't have a budget that's going out of balance to the extent that ours is. So you've got to do something there, and I agree with you, it's got to be a balance between spending and revenue. But why would you say that we are going to let the resources of this country, 80% of the profits from our resources go offshore, right? 80%. Now, why would you say it's okay for foreigners to exploit the wealth of this country, and as a direct result of that, Australians now have to have lower living standards?
Okay, Ian Verrender, thank you so much for your insights.